I cannot bring you guys a piece. I cannot even say RDA without following up by talking about what an incredibly difficult schedule this guy has been given through the balance of his MMA career. If you go back and stare at his record, you stare at the dates, you stare at the consistency. RDA's only had to pull out of one fight ever that I'm aware of, and it was the biggest fight of his Conor McGregor fight. This guy doesn't miss a date for anything. Broad stroke. And this guy has never been dealt a favorable opponent. Broad stroke. I mean, so, okay, he's in there with Chiesa. Now, the big problem you're going to have with Chiesa is now a 170-pounder, and he's adjusted to it. Chiesa should have been a 170-pounder for his entire career just based on height. He should have looked at his frame. He should have looked at the broadness of his shoulders. He should have looked at how tall that he is, and then he should have looked to put weight on. But it took him a while to finally come to that conclusion on his own. Once he came to that conclusion, there's some growing pains. I mean, there just is. You're in a new division. Things are different. Your preparation's different. Your performance is going to be a little different. I would never say that Chiesa ever looked bad. I will just share with you, there's nights that he usually looks good, but many times looks great. Michael Chiesa's second opportunity against a world champion, okay? He beats him. Don't forget, this is Chiesa's second time beating a world champion. He finished Carlos Condit. That's pretty damn impressive. And when you go in there and you get a couple of wins over guys that used to hold the strap, you matter, and there's no way around it. Now, I don't think that Chiesa is getting his comeuppance. I think that Chiesa has arrived. He's been main events before. He was in a co-main last night on the worldwide leader of ESPN. I think that Chiesa is getting his due. I would just suggest for you, perhaps we need to give him a little bit more due. He then called out Colby Covington. Now, that was interesting for a couple of different reasons. First off, nobody calls out Colby Covington. People are more than happy to put Colby down and insult him through the media, never to his face. But nobody actually goes as far as to say, hey, somebody give me a contract and lock me in a cage with this guy. So, props to Chiesa. Took a lot of courage. And if there's anything that we learned about Colby from his last fight to Kamaru Usman, okay, if we found out that Kamaru Usman is the champion of the world, and we did, we also found out that Colby Covington is champion A, right? Champion -1. He's the second baddest dude, and Chiesa is now saying, I want to fight the second baddest dude, which I'm assuming he is calling out because he just beat 2 world champions. Oh, and by the way, it looks like the Kamaru, the champion, is going to take on the BMF champion in Masvidal. I mean, all roads do appear to be pointed in that direction. So that's a pretty good call out. And if you're in Colby's spot, Colby's looking for a big fight. He's looking for a meaningful fight. But more than anything, Colby's looking for a fight. And nobody calls him out. It sounds like if Colby wants a match, boom, he might have just found one. I don't know how bullish I am that Colby's going to accept that and that's a fight that's going to happen. But in many ways, and maybe it starts with us. Maybe we start talking about this fight right now and gaining him a little steam. But it would seem that Chiesa, who just came off a co-main event victory over a former world champion who represents the second world champion that he's now beaten, to go in against the guy who is clearly the number one contender. Colby, at a minimum, is the number one contender. At a minimum. But many people feel he should be put in the spot and fight Kamaru again. There was enough heat and controversy on that first fight. And I think if it wasn't for Colby breaking his jaw and all of a sudden, oh my goodness, when's he coming back? I think that dialogue and talk would have gone, and it probably would be an immediate rematch. And if you go back and watch that fight, it was one of the greatest welterweight fights of all time. It was dead tied, according to the judge. I thought it was 3-1 going into the final myself. That's an unofficial card. The official cards had it dead tied going into the 5th, and not for nothing, that fight got dirty fast. That was a very, very interesting and hard-fought contest. So to make believe, I guess what I'm speaking to is the fact that Chiesa, I think, did a little bit of chess here. I think he recognizes Colby is the guy as soon as he heals up, but there's an opportunity now to slide in, grab a hold of Colby, and see if I can get a W, because all roads do look like it's pointing to BMF versus Undisputed. I think we can agree on that.